The history of art. Eastern European history. The ancient city of Byzantium, today's Istanbul, was founded as a colony from the Greek city of Megara in 660 BC, when the Christian religion was born. Recognized and accepted, its disciples and believers spread north along the Black Sea coast into Europe and the Ukraine. The Russian people were not all descendants of Iranian tribes, for by far the largest core of Russian nationality is Slavic, a people who inhabited the lands between the rivers Dnieper and Dniester. All research prior to written information is based upon unearthing finds for providing a time in history necessary towards building a picture of the age. The history of art of the period relies upon wall paintings, artifacts, and pottery to give some sort of expression, style and feeling of the community that produced them. Experts declare an opinion upon each new find fitting the disclosures into the existing picture. Prior to the splitting up of the Roman Empire by Constantine, the development of Egyptian, Greek and Roman wall paintings continued at a slow pace. These frescoes, decorating either inner or outer walls of premier buildings, were painted on wet or dry plaster and, like all commissioned work, assumed common features acceptable to the commissioner. With the birth of Christ and his later recognition by the community and its leaders as ordained, religious rooms and buildings were converted and later specially constructed. These early churches decorated according to common practice for buildings of note, adopting the new religion's prophets, disciples and saints as frescoes and mosaic subjects. These wall paintings and frescoes and stone pottery chips remain static with the building, needing another form to provide a transferable, more lasting surface for the artist and his materials. Painting onto a wood panel, covered with plaster, provides a sympathetic surface. These were transportable and adaptable and could form an altarpiece or screen. The art style and form evolved. The picture transcended from a celebratory and decorative piece to spiritual intermediary, to act through prayer for the believer. The importance to the Eastern Christians of icons was not planned or envisaged, but assumed in time, as a longing for recognition and acceptance for all the suffering born from war's turmoil and suppression. In 395, the Christian Emperor Constantine divided the Roman Empire to create a western half based on Rome and an eastern half based on Constantinople. The empire covered most of the coastline of the Mediterranean and its islands, plus Italy and Greece, Turkey and Egypt. On the death of Justinian, 527-565, the Eastern Empire, called Byzantium, maintained Anatolia, mainly Greece and Turkey, and 20 years later, during the iconoclastic controversy, the Greek Orthodox Church split from the Roman half. The Byzantine Empire reached its height at the turn of the first millennium under the Macedonian dynasty. The Bulgars, led by Basil II, crushed this. Islamic expansion in the 7th and 8th centuries reduced the empire so that by the first part of the first millennium, Byzantium was still the largest empire in the Christian world, holding to the east Asia Minor, today is Turkey, part of Armenia and Cyprus, and to the west, Greece and the southern Balkans, the Aegean, Ionian Islands, Crete and 2 isolated islands. 30 years later, with the death of Manuel I, only Greece, Crete, Cyprus and part of Turkey remained. Byzantium was a medieval empire peopled by mainly Greeks, speaking the Eastern Slavic tongue, today's Ukrainians and Western Russians. The Eastern Church, headed by the ecumenical patriarch, taught religious scriptures based upon the Bible and the Nicene Creed, celebrates the Eucharist. The Eastern Slavs were introduced to this influence with their established art form when they were converted to Christianity. and embracing the new feudal state of Kievan Rus, headed by their leader, the great Prince of Kiev, Vladimir, in 980 to 1015. Vladimir married Anne, the sister of the joint emperors of Byzantium, Basil and Constantine, and as a marriage gift he gave back the town of Kherson, and receiving not only a bride but also many gifts, including holy icons. Returning to Kiev as a Christian, he converted the population and built churches to accommodate the new religion. These churches needed architects, designers, artists, and building artisans, and he enrolled these from Byzantium, sending suitable men in their place to be trained in all these arts. And this is where our story begins, with these artisans, in 1037, when Harold Hardrada joined the Varangian Guard, becoming their chief in 1043, and Vladimir's son, Yaroslav, Grand Prince of Kievan Rus, assumed his father's position. It was Yaroslav's dream to make Kiev into a new Russian Constantinople named Tsargrad. My representational icon on the front cover is based upon the 11th century mosaic by the monk Olympus of Pershek, who was laid to rest in the Cathedral of the Holy Wisdom, Kiev. This was a period of great church building which became a social passion, built for by tithes. The second most important city was Novgorod, on Lake Ilmen, east of Moscow. The new churches, some brick, others wooden, another art form, required decoration to be accomplished in the then traditional manner. The form took on a feudal and primitive style. The geometric patterns and human forms were richly coloured, copying former work. It was a fresco painting, mosaic laying era of great importance, delivering a style developed by past traditions. The decoration of walls, ceilings and floors of religious buildings considered part of the national heritage. The archaic art style relied upon a broad outline to features and detailing, and this sketched style was seen on mosaics, tilework, frescoes and wooden panels. These decorative finishes were there to add beauty that declared the building's importance. This continued throughout the ages until, in Greater Russia, after a period of self-examination, taking 400 years, the icon was officially approved as part of the Holy Liturgy. This occurred about the same time that Yaroslav the Wise assumed the title Great Prince, in the early part of the 11th century, and this marked the time of religious conversion and the building of many churches, a time of expansion and prosperity. A high percentage of Russian churches displayed a particular design feature, becoming an art form in its own right. They were constructed of wood, and being the most plentiful local material, showing all the structural ribwork within the church interior. Although the exposed wood was rough and unfinished, it had a naive beauty not appreciated at first, though, but became accepted as a unique and valued part of the national heritage. The lower sections of the walls were decorated by the erection of painted panels. These too became part of the design feature as part of the religious experience. This was the beginning of the development of the Russian Orthodox Church and their sacred pictures or icons. It's important to remember that this does not mean that all wall paintings or panel paintings were icons. Russian churches each had their own patron saints. The most important wall panels in each church depicted this particular saint, which held special significance, which provided good harvest, birth of a healthy child, healed certain illnesses, aided the traveller and blessed the home. Vladimir's son Yaroslav founded the city of Kiev in today's Ukraine and the city church of St. Sophia. For a period, Kiev was the capital of Greater Russia. If you travel north from Istanbul, Constantinople, to Novgorod, Gorky, you will pass through the western province of Turkey, on through Bulgaria, Romania, Moldova and the Ukraine, into central Russia. This was a pack-horse route used by soldiers and merchants from the Grand Prince's residence to the famous imperial city. There is a famous link between the kings of England and Russia. King Harold Hardrada, son of Canute, fled from northern England to Constantinople. There he wedded Elizabeth, daughter of Yaroslav, thereby becoming King of Norway. He later invaded England and killed Harold II, son of Godwin, just before William of Normandy invaded southern England in 1066, which resulted in Harold's death on the field of battle. Many of Harold's men sought shelter abroad, eventually making up the Varangian Guard, the Emperor's Guard becoming one of the Immortals based in Constantinople. Emperor Monomac was crowned Metropolitan of Ephesus and later married Githia, daughter of Harold, who died in 1125, buried in the great church of St. Sophia in Kiev. The icon became fully accepted as part of the Holy Liturgy after the struggles between the iconoclasts, those who thought it was idol-worshipping, and supporters, who eventually won. By the turn of the first millennium, icons were accepted fact, both justified and preserved. Icons were not idols, but transfigurations. This was the start of the Byzantine period. Many of the icons displayed the Virgin Mary, mostly with the Christ child. It was believed that the incarnation was linked to the Virgin, and the celebration of her feasts. Those prayers to her afforded protection. Mary rises up her hands in a powerful gesture of intercession, the Russian people receiving the blessing of God's eternal word. As Russia was almost continuously being raided across her borders, it was natural that warrior saints would also be venerated. In this book, we are more concerned with the Greco-Russian Novgorod abstract style of the period 1350 to 1550. This national style is demonstrated by the champion of this style, Theophanes the Greek, and his pupil Andrew Rublev, 1370 to 1430. This era was about the same working period as Angelico and Uccello and Van Eyck. These were other schools, namely Ver, Pesov, Vladimir Sozdal and Moscow, but art critics consider the Novgorod style the most unique. Art historians and religious experts that the 200-year period were the most significant in the production of icons. It was not just a stagnant period adopting just one style, but a progressive one, perfecting the construction, preparation and production to a remarkable degree of an art form. By 1453, the light of the Byzantine Empire of over 1,000 years had been extinguished. Byzantium was no more. Influence passed into Slav hands to the northern people. Although political power forgotten, its religious power survived in the Orthodox Church of Eastern Europe, along with liturgy and rituals. Its belief in the established art form continued unabated. These inspirational steps from the austerity of Mount Athos to the Western art style remained close to the Russian state's power base. Religious art transferred from Greece by way of Constantinople to Kiev, thence to Novgorod, 250 miles east of Moscow. In early Russian history, the ruler's power resided in Kiev. It was then taken to Moscow at the time of Rostislav in 1577. Novgorod had a number of Greek artists teaching the accepted style. Two of them, Petrovitz and Theovan, were the greatest, working there in the 12th century. This was the start to Novgorod schools employing a number of students. Fortunately, the school escaped the terrible subjugation by the Mongol invaders the next century, allowing the style to develop further. Before the end of the 14th century, Rublev resided over the greatest icon period. He had been a student of Theophanes, In this period of calm, the national style survived well into the next century. This was a century noted for the development of iconoclasts. This was an ecclesiastical dividing wall separating the sanctuary from the body of the church. It had always been there, but not of such proportions. By 1551, painters and students instructed and trained to model themselves on his work and ideas. The iconostasts were wooden screens with a central doorway which was highly carved. The whole edifice was made of individual windows in many tiers, and these were to take panel pictures, and they stretched from wall to wall, ground to ceiling. It was a mighty barrier of golden mouldings, statuary, drapery, jewels, and religious pictures. No word can express its magnificence and opulence. The windows were filled with panel paintings of all ages. Many of the old venerated works gave the new a passed-on importance, and each part of the structure had its own cognizance, each tier named and respected, ascending in order of inherent symbolic power. On the lowest level, the holy doors, with the place of honour on the left given to the Virgin, and on the other side of the door the Pantocrator, Christ surrounded by scenes from his life, from Annunciation to Ascension. The second tier, known as the Dais, the third the Festival, and the fourth the Prophets, finally the fifth given over to God the Father. This brief summary refers to 5 tiers. There are, however, instances of 7. It's difficult to describe the spiritual significance icons held for the peasantry of Eastern Europe and Russia during the middle of the second millennium. They were more than just religious pictures or objects one prayed before. They held the most important centre of the home. It was if the icon held the family's heart and body. It didn't matter how perfectly painted the icon was or how polished and dusted, for it had a being of its own. This may have been because it had been handed down, had always been held in esteem, and always would be, an expression of religious thought and piety, as a matter of habit and acceptance, not questioned. However, it was more than that. It was a goodwill charm that gave promise to a better future.